Hopefully that'll work for him.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think now is a good time to go ahead and get started. Just a housekeeping issue. We will be putting this on social media. So if you'd like to keep your picture off of social media, then just keep your camera off.
Okay.
And I would love to welcome Beth Kohler here today. She is from Special Education Mediation Services, and she's here to talk to us today about their mediation and facilitation services that they have for free for parents and schools. Let me introduce her. She is the Southeast Michigan Outreach Representative for the program, which represents 12 counties. She's also the parent of 2 adult children. One of those children is 22 and has received services since he was 18 months old. So so Beth has had a ton of experience navigating complex school relationships, and we can't wait to hear how you can help us to understand those better.
Great, it's my pleasure. Thank you again for having me. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick and take you through a really fast presentation. Usually, this takes about an hour, but we're going to do it super fast tonight. And there we go. And I'll direct you to, at the end, hopefully I'll have some time to paste some website links to give you some links to a full-length presentation. If I forget, they're all on the Michigan Alliance for Families webinar page. And the title of that, I'll review later, but it's under the communication section of their pre-recorded webinars. So thank you, Candace, for the introduction. As she mentioned, I have 2 kids. My oldest is Cameron, and Cameron was born with Williams syndrome. And we were, I guess, the beneficiaries of a really robust child find program in Monroe County, which is where we live. He was premature and born in Toledo, and I don't know who it was, maybe a social worker, who told the Monroe County Intermediate School District that they had a new child in their region that potentially needed services. And we put them off and put them off and put them off because, of course, you know, pediatricians do that adjusted age thing when babies are premature. And after about a year, we decided, you know, maybe we should let somebody evaluate him. So that's the start of our journey with special education supports and services. And he's 22 now. He was fully included in kindergarten through 12th grade, and we actually dual enrolled him in preschool. So he went to what at the time was called pre-primary impaired preschool. I think it's ECSE now. And then we enrolled him in a typical preschool setting. So he'd go to the early childhood, the ECSE one in the morning, and then in the afternoon, he would go to a typical preschool setting. And that worked really well. But as Candace mentioned, really complex, took a village, and we really had to work on building really strong relationships. So this program, the Special Education Mediation Services Program, if you've never heard of it, has been around since 1997. As part of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, each state is required to have a dispute resolution system that contains the ability to file a state complaint and to file for due process and manifestation determination reviews. Michigan and many other states, but Michigan chooses to expand on those services, let's say to be more preventative in nature. And that's our program. So my job, and I have 2 partners who are also outreach representatives that represent the rest of the state. So we typically would be traveling the state and talking to parent advisory committees, departments of health and human service, child and family services agencies, organizations like A2 Therapy, to just let people know that this program is available at no cost to families and schools. There are no charges for our services. No one will receive an invoice for our services. And our ultimate goal is to help build cooperation and effective teamwork among those who plan a student's education, receiving special education supports and services, with the ultimate goal of improving our educational outcomes. So we're a grant-funded program again. It's mandated by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It's a Michigan Department of Education Office of Special Education program. And these are the services that we offer. Again, I'm going to use the word free and no cost 100 times at least in the next half an hour. Let me start my clock. And we also provide communication and collaboration training to schools, parent groups, again, service providers, interested parties who want to help students who receive special education supports and services. And then this enables them to meet their obligations under the federal law. So since 1997, we've helped about 3,500 students, and we have an 85% success rate. So what that means is when a family and or a school, well, it's always a family and school, but the school could contact us or the family could contact us. 85% of the time, we help them solve their problem. So, and then we do this work through 17 community dispute resolution centers across the state of Michigan. So there are subcontractors all over the state of Michigan. So in Washtenaw County, the Dispute Resolution Center is located in Ann Arbor. There's only a couple of counties that have one county they're responsible for. So the Ann Arbor Center is responsible for Washtenaw County and Livingston County. Oakland County is just responsible for Oakland County, and Wayne County is just responsible for Wayne County. And the rest of the centers around the state, they could have 5 or 6 counties they're responsible for, just depending on the population of where they're located. So the 2 main services that we provide are mediation and facilitation. And mediation is just what it says. It's an assisted negotiation to resolve differences, right? So another thing I'm going to say is call early, call often. You don't have to wait until you're in conflict with one another. It could just be complicated and you're needing somebody to help guide you to a resolution, right? And then facilitation is a coordinated discussion. So we facilitate, I'm going to move our faces here for a second. So we facilitate IEP meetings, IFSP meetings, behavior intervention programs, any type of meeting where you're going to have a group of people that are going to come together to try to determine what are the best, most appropriate services for a student to receive. In Cameron's situation, because he was fully included and because of the way our school system worked, sometimes we had 15 people at his IEP meetings. And that's a herd of cats that can be very difficult and complicated to manage. Most school systems don't have the budget to hire 15 substitute teachers that day to participate in the IEP. And the law doesn't require them all to be there. The best practice might be that they be there, but the law doesn't require that they be there. And so in our circumstance, we had a teacher consultant who was his case manager, so to speak. And that person was really responsible for making sure that Cameron's IEP was implemented. Well, unfortunately, she was also the person that was running down the hallway trying to grab a teacher to come in and provide some input, or an ancillary service provider. She was the cat herder. The cat herder is really hard to attend to the meeting. It's really hard to be in charge of a meeting and also be the person who's taking the notes and being the scribe, making sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. So a facilitated meeting, we could provide that service to help run the meeting efficiently, to make sure that all of the sections, let's say it's an IEP meeting, to make sure all of the sections of the IEP meeting are reviewed, to make sure everybody's getting equal speaking time, equal input, and that you come up with a solid, workable plan at the end of the day. Something that's really important to remember is these are neutral services. So we have very highly trained mediators and meeting facilitators. They're one and the same. So a mediator could also be a facilitator could also be a mediator. They go through the same training. They're highly trained individuals. They're not necessarily lawyers. They could be teachers, social workers, concerned citizens who just want everybody to get along and they wanted to go through the training. So you go through, it's a 40-hour civil mediation training program. There's a robust what I refer to as an internship program and a period of practice. So they're partnered with people before they're allowed to mediate on their own. And then a period of practice after that. If they are recommended to the Special Education Mediation Services program to potentially be a mediator for this. They would then go through another robust training program. The manual is about that thick, and it contains the Special Education, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act law, and the Michigan Administrative Rules for Special Education, and any kind of case law that's happened in our circuit that affects how we do school in the state of Michigan. And then they're partnered with somebody and they team up, and before they're released on their own to provide special education mediations and facilitations. Part of that training is really focused on neutrality. The mediator does not take sides. They help the team come together and build consensus. So that's something that's really important. A lot of times people get into the mindset that this is a legal process and therefore the mediator is going to decide for people, and that's simply not what this is. So we'll get into some more details about what these look like. So when you use facilitation, again, call us early, call us often. It doesn't cost anything. So you got nothing to lose other than time, perhaps. But if you, let's say you have an IEP, you could have an IEP with just 4 people around the table. You don't have to wait till there's one with 15 people around the table. Your IFSP, so when you're transitioning, you're in early childhood and maybe transitioning to 3 and then to kindergarten, a manifestation determination review. If it's just complicated, right? So a lot of times I'll tell a story about when Cameron was in high school. I really, this was the hill I was willing to die on, wanted him to be in the school store. And at the time, the school store was a program in our high school that was operated by the Monroe County Intermediate School District. And remember, Cameron was a fully included student. And so that was a bit of a challenging line of authority and responsibility to cross. And they really struggled with, well, who's going to be responsible for him? Does that equate a change of placement? Because now he's in a classroom that is all students with disabilities, and his IEP says that he's supposed to be fully included in the LRE with 80% of the time in the gen ed curriculum. So what are we going to do? And it was a really complicated meeting. My gosh, we spent hours and hours and hours talking about this. And it would have been a great opportunity to have a facilitator come in and help us figure out the path to get there. Fortunately, we had an assistant principal that came up with a great idea of having the marketing teacher take Cameron on as an independent study. And so he willingly took responsibility for monitoring and supervising Cameron while he was in the school store. And it worked out great. But that's an example of just a complicated, complex meeting. We weren't arguing about anything. We just couldn't, it was so close to us, we couldn't see the solution. A resolution session, which is part of the formal due process in the state of Michigan. And I'm not going to talk about it because it's really complex and it'll take hours to explain. But if you want to learn more about it, go to the Michigan Alliance for Families website. And they do have some webinars about our formal due process and state complaint dispute resolution options in the state of Michigan. If you're uneasy about a meeting, if you're just not accustomed to speaking out, it's an uncomfortable situation for you, and or there's just some personality conflicts, and you just need some additional help. And if you just need to focus, like I said before, on a very specific issue. So what the facilitator does not necessarily run this meeting. It's really up to the school. They can, but so I've witnessed meeting facilitations before where let's say the special ed director, we'll just say the special ed director is running the meeting, and the facilitator may offer suggestions, may say, hey, I know that Mrs. Kohler was really concerned about this issue. We haven't talked about it yet, so I would really like to focus on that right now. So that's maybe what a facilitation might look like. And I'll talk a little bit about how you start this process in just a second. So when to use mediation, typically it's a dispute, but remember, you don't have to wait till you're mad. You can just disagree, right? We can disagree with people all the time without being angry and mad. It's not easy, but it's possible. And so this could be eligibility for programs or services. So let's just say, for example, I really want my child to have occupational therapy services. And the school doesn't agree that it's a necessity. So we can help mediate that, right? Evaluation interpretations. Maybe my private occupational therapist is saying, I really think that Cameron could benefit from 2 one-hour sessions a week. But Cameron's, the school district's evaluation is going to say something like up to 2 15-minute sessions 3 to 4 times a month, right? That's kind of how those things read. And so we're disagreeing over the evaluation interpretations, over transition and discipline issues, and service delivery and its effectiveness. And then in lieu of a resolution session. So part of our formal dispute resolution process in the state of Michigan, a state complaint, you're going to be, if you file a state complaint, always within your right to do so. If you file a state complaint, you're going to be given the opportunity to decide if you want to try a mediation. So we would be that service that would come in and provide that mediation. And if the parties agree, it can suspend the timelines during the mediation. And if you come to an agreement during the mediation, you can withdraw the state complaint. If you don't come to an agreement, then the state complaint can move forward if you want it to. And then a resolution session, part of the formal due process. Someday I'm going to figure out a different way to say that, but I haven't yet. So that part of that process, there's a resolution session that we can facilitate. And then anytime you have communication or relationship issues. So that can happen anytime. But let's use middle school as an example of a communication. So the older students get, the more that teachers and schools want students to be responsible for their communication between school and home. So, sorry, I'm getting interrupted and I'm a little distracted right in the moment. But so maybe it's not working, right? Maybe your 7th grader isn't really good at bringing all that material home in their backpack, or they're not good at taking it out, or it never makes it into their backpack or out of their locker, or maybe it just falls on the floor on the bus, or who knows what, right? And it's important because you need to be able to communicate back and forth. And you could use mediation to develop a communication plan that would work for both the school and the family. So an important thing to remember is our mediators and facilitators are not part of the team. They're not part of the IEP team, okay? They're not going to provide legal advice. They're not going to make decisions on behalf of the people around the table. Their goal is to help build the skills and the communication channels to lead people to productive problem solving and consensus. A mediation agreement, a mediation agreement is a legal document. If you come to an agreement right then and there, if we were in person, they would be doing this on pencil and paper, with pen and paper. They would be writing out the solution that the team agreed to. Typically, they're going to narrow it down to 1 or 2 things to solve. Both parties sign the agreement. It becomes an addendum of the IEP. If for some reason it doesn't get followed, so the mediator is not going to enforce it, but if for some reason the agreement doesn't get followed, you certainly have your formal dispute resolution options available to you. If it proceeds to this level, it can be used as evidence in court. The discussions held during a mediation are always confidential. So the document itself is the thing that's going to be the legal entity, not the conversations that were had during. And there's a lot of really good reasons that I'm not going to get into for that. The only exception, and so for those of you that work in healthcare or social work or teaching are going to understand this more than others, is if something was brought up during the mediation that's considered a mandatory reporting issue, right? So there are certain things that happen. If you heard some evidence maybe of child abuse or whatever, then it would have to be reported. That would not remain confidential. So what you would do is you would call our office, and the numbers will be at the end of the presentation. Even if you're not sure, you just have a hunch that maybe you would benefit from using these services, you would call our office. We have typically 2 to 3 people, very well trained. They have 120 years combined of special education knowledge. And you're going to get them on the phone, and you're just going to tell them what's going on. And you can say, I'm not really sure if I need you. And if I do need you, is it for a facilitation or mediation? And they'll guide you through that process and provide you with the options. Because it's a voluntary program, they're going to call. So if it's initiated by a parent, they're going to call the school, and they're going to say, and it's probably going to be the special ed director or the person that's in charge, and they're going to say, Mrs. Kohler just called us. She's let us know that she has some concerns, and she's requested a meeting facilitation, and we would like you to participate. And then the school needs to agree or disagree to participate. The intake office is really, really good at getting people to agree to participate. And then they'll work on mutually agreed upon times and scheduling and locations. Right now, all of these services are available online, and by request, when all parties agree and it can be done safely, they'll do it in person. But it just kind of depends on where it's at and where it's located. And that's, today at 7:03 p.m. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but we are able to do all of this online as well. So the next thing that Candace asked me to talk about was one of the things that our real goal is. So a due process filing, now they're not that common, but a due process filing will cost the state of Michigan about $50,000 to $60,000 from start to finish. It takes about 200 days right now for a due process filing to finish. And that was pre-COVID. I have no idea what's going on now and what the timelines look like for that. That's just what it costs the state of Michigan. That's not what it costs families, and that's not what it costs schools. The theory is that the more we can teach families and schools how to better communicate with one another and how to problem solve themselves, the more money it's going to save the state. And in theory, that money will get funneled into our local education and schools for program and support. But it takes a lot of work to build those relationship skills, right? So I have this quote from Stephen Covey here, that building and repairing relationships requires long-term investment. So one of the things I was sharing with Candace when we talked earlier was, Cameron being fully included was a lot of work. And it took an awful lot of effort by an awful lot of people. It was not necessarily sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns, okay? But over time, I worked, my husband worked, and the staff worked on really building that rapport with one another, and it was a two-way street for me. So an example of something that I would do to help build this relationship was, for example, if something just cool happened one day and I heard about it, I would call the building principal and say, hey, I heard about something really cool today, and I just wanted to let you know how much I appreciated it. But I wouldn't stop there. I would send an email to the superintendent and the Board of Education. Because believe you me, they hear about all the bad stuff all the time, but they don't necessarily hear about the good stuff. And that was one of the ways that I worked really hard on building relationships over the years. At the end of every school year, I always sent a letter, usually an email. I would send it to the building principal, his teacher or teachers, the superintendent, and the Board of Education. And I would pick out all of the really awesome, positive things. It could be something as simple as one year, Cameron had a really tough time participating in fire drills. And, you gotta learn how to do that, right? I mean, we can take him out of the room before the fire drill happens, or out of the building before the fire drill happens. We can give him headphones before the fire drill happens. But he got to know that if he saw the headphones, that meant a fire drill was coming. And so that didn't alleviate his anxiety. He's got to learn what to do if there's a fire. And we just couldn't figure it out. And one year, the school custodian, whose name is Tom, everybody affectionately refers to him as Mr. Tom, just had an epiphany about what if we put Cameron in charge of the fire drill one day. And it simply, in this building at this moment in time, was just turning a key. But he gave Cameron control over turning that key, and he had power over the situation. And from that moment forward, Cameron was able to participate in fire drills. And so that's an example of something that I would really celebrate and let people know that it happened. Fast forward to 2017, when Cameron finished high school, I called the superintendent and said, I really want some time at a board meeting, and I want more than 3 minutes. And I want it to be on a night, because usually your public commentary, you're limited to 3 minutes, and they hold up a sign that says, 60 seconds left. Said, I want it to be on a night where there's nothing being disputed. I just have some really positive things that I want to say thank you. And I kept over the years all those notes and all those letters, and one by one called out all those people who were a positive influence in Cameron's educational experience. And they gave me, I think I talked for 25 minutes at this board meeting. And I say that because that was work. It didn't happen automatically. It was sometimes I had to dig deep for the positive things. And they're his biggest champion now. So that's where he does his work experiences. They've hired him over summers now to be a building assistant during our summer learning academy programs. And this year. But prior to COVID-19, all of these amazing, and that was because we worked really, really hard at building those long-term relationships. Again, it wasn't all sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns. I'm not saying it was easy, but it took a lot of work on my part too. It wasn't something that just automatically happened. So, come on, you can do it. Forward. No, there we go. So, one of the things that we're doing right now is providing a lot of professional development. There's lots of free professional development on the internet right at the moment. One of the things we're doing right now is we're partnering with the Michigan Alliance for Families, and we are providing training opportunities on how to participate in virtual meetings. So these are the things that are going to be covered during that. The first session is November 10th. So if you go to the Michigan Alliance for Families, you can, under their webinars and upcoming events, you can register. And that particular training is going to be offered once a month, I think through May. So if you want to learn more, it's going to be taught by colleagues of mine. If you want to learn more about efficient, effective ways to participate in virtual meetings, I would really strongly suggest that you take a look at that. And then the other webinar that I mentioned, if you want to hear the full presentation about special education mediation services and meeting facilitations and mediations and how they collaborate with our formal dispute resolution process, Cheryl Levine, who is the project coordinator for SEMS, did a 1-hour webinar with the Michigan Alliance for Families, and it's called Working Together When We Don't Agree. And if you go to their website and you click on webinars and pre-recorded webinars and go down to where it says communication webinars, you'll see that. I would encourage you, if you have more questions about this very fast presentation that I did, to fully watch that for some good information. So here's our contact information. There's our 1833 number and our email address. My email personally is beth.kohler, Kohler, and then it's at mykidsfirst.org if you have additional questions and you want to reach out and talk to me directly. And I think these are my colleagues. I think that's it. So I'm going to stop sharing and come back on. And wow, I did it in 24 minutes. So, so what do you want me to do now? Questions or?
Thank you, Beth. Yes. I'd love to take some questions for you.
Okay.
So anyone is welcome to speak out or to type your question in the chat.
I'm going to type our website while they're. That's where those two websites that I had mentioned. I hope I spelled Michigan. I I think I did. So.
Yeah. So I have one question for you. How about those virtual meetings that you were talking about? That's a challenging thing for a lot of people. It's a totally different environment than sitting down at a table around people and being able to physically see and physically, be around other people. What kind of tips do you have for building relationships within the virtual environment?
What's one of the most commonly, not necessarily popular, but one of the most commonly heard phrases this year is we're building the plane while we're in the air, right? So I think what I'm going to say is be okay with it being a little messy, right? I don't know if you saw my son walking around behind me while I was talking, right? What are you going to do? And understanding that not everybody has the same technology, right? We have learned a lot about the digital divide this year. And so sometimes those virtual meetings might be remote meetings, right? So we might not be on Zoom or Teams or Google Meets or whatever because the family doesn't have the technology. And so sometimes those just might be conference calls. And I think a good practice all the time is to try to be prepared. Have notes. I have notes in front of me. I tried really hard to stare at the camera all the time and not look at my notes, but but sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. And again, our facilitators and our mediators have gone through some robust Zoom training, so they know how to create breakout rooms. If they have to have a private conference with somebody, they're really well versed in how to do that. If they believe there's a confidentiality issue occurring, they're really well versed in how to handle those issues. So I'm going to strongly suggest you watch the webinar because I'm not the expert on this. My colleagues are the ones that manage these meetings. I'm good enough to do what I just did tonight. But, and there are tips. The Michigan Alliance for Families on their COVID-19 page also has some how to prepare in virtual meeting tips. And I think they were put out in collaboration with the Center for Appropriate Dispute Resolution and Education. That's CADRE, C-A-D-R-E, works.org, with the OSEP, with the United States Department of Education Office of Special Education Programs. There's a whole bunch of people that were, their logos are at the bottom of that document, and they have some good tips and tricks on how to, I might be able to find that while I'm talking to you if I minimize my screen real quick. They have a good document. It's a PDF document, so I don't know. That's why I want to find the Alliance link, because I don't know how to post a PDF directly to the chat function. No, that's not what I want. Any other questions while I'm looking for this link?
Well, you mentioned that it was really important that your son was fully included. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means?
So that was important to our family, right? So that was something that was really part of our family values. Part of our philosophy in life is to have, inclusive communities made up of all sorts of different people who have different things to contribute. They're not all the same things necessarily, and how they contribute. And so I can't tell you why. It's just always been that way for us. And so we really primed that pump early on. This is me speaking as Beth Kohler, mom to Cameron, not necessarily as employee of SEMS. It was just something that was really, really important to us. And we had a lot of conversations early on about that. And we're very fortunate to have had a school that agreed with us and really worked hard to help that look successful. I don't know that I answered your question, Candace, but it was something that we were really committed to making work. And I think if that's something that you have, it's not something that the SEMS program would do, because remember, we're a neutral service, we don't advocate, but you could certainly call your parent mentor, call the Michigan Alliance for Families. If you want to learn more about what that could look like for your student, call the Michigan Alliance for Families and ask to speak with a parent representative, and they could help steer you in the right direction with what types of information you would need to go about that. I am not finding this.
I have another question while you're looking.
Yeah, sure.
Do you guys have any really great upcoming events that you would recommend to either families or professionals that are happening? Aside, I know you mentioned a little bit about free online trainings and things like that, but what kinds of stuff do you have coming up?
This week was the Living with Autism, still happening. So that's part of Metro Detroit Parent. It's been totally virtual. Tomorrow, if you're registered for that event, and I don't know if you still can or not, if you're registered for that, tomorrow at 11 o'clock is an FAQ panel that our project coordinator, Cheryl Levine, is going to be participating in. I believe Marcia Lipsitz is participating on that, and Maureen Ziegler from the START program, and there's another person whose name is escaping me right at the moment that is participating in that. So that might be, an interesting thing to listen in on. I know that I'm telling you stuff that's over, which is not going to be helpful. I found it, so I'm distracted for a second. So I think the National ARC Conference just finished today, maybe. There's your resources virtual IEP meeting tip sheet. And let me see if I can look at my calendar real quick. Outside of the Alliance webinars and stuff, let's see what's coming up. Something that there is a virtual wellness and epilepsy conference coming up that we're participating in October 13th and 14th. There's a virtual parenting and awareness conference happening on November 20th. The Michigan Association of School Social Workers Conference is happening on the 19th. That is also virtual. We're participating in that. I mean, that doesn't mean you have to watch our stuff, but those are just the things that I know that are coming up. I thought maybe it's in January, the Michigan Transition Association Conference is coming up. And that's about it in the short term, I think. A lot of stuff is happening virtual. I know there was a really big event that Michigan Department of Health and Human Services was putting on that was supposed to be last spring. I can't remember what it was called, the Michigan Family Summit, maybe? And it was going to be at the Novi Expo Center. And that has officially been rescheduled for the spring. We'll see. Write it in pencil on your calendar. We'll see.
I feel like I'm writing everything in pencil on my calendar.
I know. Right. I know. So, gosh, we're still on, and it's been 42 minutes. So they gave you some grace.
It did. It popped up and said that there was a gift from Zoom. So
awesome. Yay, Zoom.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
I can type my email address in here real quick too if people are reluctant to out themselves on the chat. There's my email address. So
you. I'm wondering if what's been put in the chat can be circulated somehow.
Sure. Yes. Well, we have a Facebook page, and we could definitely put that information on the Facebook page.
Okay, and is that the A2 Therapy Works?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm just, we're not at the park anymore, but we're in motion, so I can't access the comments. So thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you again. I
Beth.
really appreciate you having me tonight.
Mhm. That was great. That was so informative. Thank you.
Good. Good. You're welcome. Good luck, everybody.
Thanks so much, Beth. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.